Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to For StarCraft 2 Strategy. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Terran strategy. Now the Terran player in the strategy replay is Kawaii Rice, and our Protoss opponent is Huck. Both very strong players here, so let's go ahead and take a look straight into Kawaii Vision. Now again, this is a Terran strategy, and what we're going to be looking at in particular today is we're going to be looking at going for some early game Marauder and Hellion pressure, and then following it up with a switch into Banshees and Marine and Marauder. Now this is going to be a very strong build versus Protoss opponents. That early game Marauder and Hellion pressure doing well. Obviously, against early game Protoss, the Marauder is going to be very strong against any Stalkers you may be seeing, and the Hellion's going to do a good job at toasting some probes as well as handling some Zealots. Now, of course, this is going to be a little micro-intensive. You do need to make sure that you keep your Hellions away from Zealots as well as the probes. You don't want them to get surrounded at all. And more importantly, what we're going to be looking at in this strategy replay is having some fun here. Now, this is a video game, and we do want to make sure that we have some fun while we're playing. And these two players in this strategy replay seem to be having a dandy time, and that's something I fully and wholeheartedly support. Seeing a little probe harass here at the start, Huck doing a good job of stopping that initial barracks from going down, but then of course we are going to make sure that we bring down a second SCV to enable us to drop that barracks. Now what we're looking at as far as timing is concerned, in the beginning it's going to be that standard opener of that 10 supply depot, the 12 barracks, followed up by the 13 refinery. This is a pretty good economic opener. It's used in a majority of Terran builds, and rightfully so, because it seems to be strong and works in many cases. So again, we're starting off with that early game Marauder and Hellion pressure. And in fact, what we're going to be seeing is proxying that factory, placing it in a position other than our main base to try to sneak in those Hellions so that our opponent doesn't know that they're coming. This is a pretty standard tactic when it comes to StarCraft, especially in the higher leagues. Players do expect full scouting from their opponent, so if you can attempt to high tech as much as possible, you're going to do a pretty good job of surprising them, and that's kind of where you're going to get the advantage in taking them off guard. Now we're going to be going ahead and getting that Orbital Command at 17, a little bit later than usual. We did want to produce these early Marines to get rid of the scout inside of our base. Again, we don't want them to see what exactly is going on. And then here we go by moving this factory outside of their base. And in fact, primarily the reason that we're going to want to put this factory in a proxy position is because he was able to keep his probe inside of our base for so very long, and we weren't able to do anything about it. Now, taking a look at our opponent's base here, we're seeing a pretty standard build so far. We saw a pylon at 9, and then that gateway came down at 12 supply. One assimilator is up and a second assimilator is coming in. Now we don't see a cybernetics core yet, but it is likely to be coming. If he was going for a 2-gate push, which is not very standard, but if that was happening, there wouldn't be the second assimilator, there would be a second gateway. So we can assume that a cybernetics core is coming down at this point. So again, we have those 2 Marines for fending off that early scout. We're coming out with our Marauder right now, as well as researching our concussive shells. And again, this factory is just finished building, and we are getting a Hellion out of that. So now we're going to be pushing out shortly. Early game Terran is very strong against early game Protoss, especially if the Protoss player is teching up even relatively normally, in which case I mean teching up to get that gateway tech. They're a little susceptible early on, and so we're going to push out pretty early with these 2 Marines, this 1 Marauder, and this Hellion here. Now you're going to see specifically what I was talking about earlier, how this can be very effective harass early in the game. We're going to be moving up right now. We do, of course, want to be wary of any force fields, so that's kind of why we're poking up initially before we fully commit to moving in, because we don't want our forces to get cut in half only to lose them for no good reason. We are, of course, going to have our production buildings rally to our opponent's base so we can maintain this harassment. Now at this point we're dropping down that starboard. Again, at the beginning of the game I was talking about switching from this early game Hellion and Marauder harass into going for some Banshees and a Marine Marauder build. So that starport is going down. We're going to be preparing to switch into Banshees, but still, in the meantime, we're going to be maintaining our harassment. Again, he's at this point where he hasn't finished researching his warp gate research. He's very susceptible. That's why precisely that I said early on Terran does very strongly against Protoss when they're teching up, especially going for that Warp Gate build, because they are vulnerable up until the point that they get Warp Gate research complete. So we were able to do a lot of damage. I mean, as you can see, he pulled the majority of his probes off the line just to defend against that. That was huge, a huge economic hit. Definitely a win in our book there. Now that our starport has finished completing, we are lifting it off and dropping it right on that tech lab that was on our barracks. Of course, we needed that tech lab on our barracks to produce those Marauders, but right now we're kind of going to concentrate on getting out these quick Banshees as fast as possible. We're also, as soon as we have the necessary Vespian, we're going to be researching that cloaking ability as well. Getting another tech lab on this barracks to enable us to produce some more Marauders once that's finished. We do have that second refinery up again because this is going to be pretty gas intensive now that we are going for Banshees. And since we're switching into Banshee and Marine Marauder, we're also going to want to drop down additional barracks as well. So taking a look here, we are still continuing this harassment by sneaking some Hellions into his base whenever we get the chance. Again, forcing him to pull his probes off the line. He's kind of having to chase this Hellion around the base. Not the best scenario for him, of course, because none of his units at this point are even relatively close to the speed of the Hellion, so it's definitely going to be difficult for him to catch him. And basically we're just being a nuisance as much as possible while we're making that tech switch and while we're preparing for that. Now up until the point that he gets his robotics facility up and he's able to make an observer, he's really not going to know what's going on. Of course he could push forward, and at that point he would see the starport, but we're kind of containing him by causing all this harassment inside of his base. We're kind of forcing him to stay here to deal with it. He really doesn't have many other options. Coming out with this second Banshee now, also dropping this additional barracks because again we're going to be going for that. Majority of our forces is going to be that ground, that Marine Marauder mix, but then we're going to be supporting that with some Banshees that are going to be very strong air to ground. They do so much damage, significant damage. And this is just to show you, this kind of play style is going to be effective if you feel comfortable with your macro and micro to the point that you can do them both simultaneously. And as you can see here, we're harassing his base, and at the very same time we're producing back at our base. We're teching up, we're dropping new buildings. In fact, we're even building up a command center so that we can go ahead and expand, because we do, while available, we do want to take advantage of that economic lead that we have because of all that probe harassment we were able to do. So these Banshees are coming out now. We're going to try to push forward with these Banshees once this one here finishes. These two players having some more fun here, something again I strongly advocate. But still, again, going for this harassment here and this early game harassment, and then following it up with this Marine and Marauder supported by Banshee build, it's going to be really strong if you're able to pull through properly. And basically, if you feel comfortable enough to do this type of strategy where you're going to be harassing your opponent as well as maintaining your base, then this is definitely something that can be effective for you. So now we're going to be moving in with our Banshees to try to do some harassment. Now, what we don't realize is that our opponent did have an observer inside of our base, so they were able to see this coming, and as you can see, they were able to properly defend against that. That's something you need to be wary of, the fact that your opponent is likely to have an observer, especially once you see that robotics facility up. You can kind of expect that from that point. Unless you're able to catch it with a scan, your opponent's going to be fully aware of what you're going for. Now, with that said, that kind of puts you in a position where this is going to be a good time for you to push out. This is going to be a scenario where if you move out now before they're able to prepare for what they can see, then you're going to be in a good position. So at this point, we're just kind of massing up our forces, bringing down all of our Marines and Marauders that we have created thus far. Again, we do have that support role of the Banshee, and that cloak is finished researching as well, so we're going to take advantage of that. Also getting the upgrades for our ground units here, getting the stim pack as well as that weapons level 1 upgrade. So taking advantage of the air, our air in these Banshees to get sight on the high ground to see what our opponent has, and then to push in with our units without getting hit by that force field. That's kind of one of the main benefits behind being able to do that. Rallying reinforcements to our base, which is again something you always want to do when you're putting on pressure on your opponent. We have stopped Banshee production at this point, and we have dropped our expansion, which is fully saturated right now. So as you can see, at this point in the game, we're in a really strong position. We're about to push out, hopefully do a lot of damage, if not take them out. And even if we don't succeed in taking them out at this point, we do have this expansion up. Clearly, as you can see here, our opponent has not expanded as well, and this is primarily due to the fact that we were able to do so much harassment and so much damage with those early game Hellions and Marauders. So, opponent here moving forward for an engagement. We do, of course, want to concentrate down the sentry to get rid of that Guardian shield there, because that's going to prevent a lot of the damage from our Marines and Marauders. And we were able to mop up, largely in part due to these Banshees supporting these Marines and Marauders. So yeah, guys, this has been a pretty strong Terran build here versus a Protoss opponent. A little micro intensive. You do need to be able to maintain your micro and macro at the same time if you're going to maintain this harassment constantly with those Hellions and Marauders early game. But if you feel comfortable doing those things simultaneously, then this can be a strong build for you. So we're going to take a look at that beginning build order here. We started off with that standard 10 supply depot, followed by that 12 barracks. Then at 13, of course, we did get our refinery. Now at 18, we dropped our factory. We dropped it in a proxy position to hide it, and also because they did have that probe in our base at that time, and we didn't want them to see that we were going to be pushing out with Hellions. Then at 18, we also dropped the tech lab on our barracks. We started coming out with those Marauders, as well as those Hellions, and then early on, we pushed out with that. Now 22 supply, we did of course get that Concussive Shell research upgraded, and by the time we got to our opponent's base it was finished. Then at 35 we went ahead and we dropped our second refinery, and at 35 as well we dropped our Starport, and that's when we did that tech switch. We followed it up by building a whole bunch of barracks, switching into Marine Marauder, getting our upgrades, and then pushing out with some Banshees as well as those Marines and Marauders. So again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what you see here, please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. So we're going to be using our SCV in conjunction with the Reaper here to try to do as much damage as possible. We're going to kill off any SCVs that are building any structures, going to try to disrupt this mineral line. We also, of course, want to kill any Marines that do come out of this barracks of his.